Hare Krishna, please accept my most respectful obeisances. Guru Maharaj, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. You're muted. They need to unmute you.
My obeisances to you, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Guru Maharaj, are you still in Mayapur or back in Bangalore? Oh, Mayapur. Jai. Wonderful. Good to see you. We have really been missing your sessions in your association, but we're very glad, honored, privileged, and fortunate to have you back again. So I think without much ado, we should begin. Today, if I understand correctly, is the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yes.
All right. So Hare Krishna, all the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. So on behalf of the School of Vedic Studies, we welcome you all. So today we're going to have the session on the 9th canto as the structural overview. And the subject matter of the 9th chapter is liberation. And we pass on the mic to His Holiness Bhakti Vijnana Goswami Maharaj. His Holiness Bhakti Vijnana Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudiraye Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Niruttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nainshtiti
Pravrajanta manapeta mapeta kritya dvaipayana virahaka tarajubhava putreti tanmayatayo taravo vinetus tam sarva bhuta hridayam munimanatosmi. So, dear devotees, today we will try to explain the essential message of the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is perhaps the most difficult one because there are so many different stories in this canto, and how to make sense of all these stories and how to formulate the essential message of all these stories, which are apparently disconnected with each other, besides the storyline, which is obvious. Sukadeva Goswami explains the two dynasties, the dynasty of Sun and Moon, and great kings of these dynasties. But besides this, what is the essential message? What Srimad Bhagavatam wants to tell us, and how understanding of this message will bring us ultimately closer to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose life and pastimes is explained or described in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, without too much saying, at this point, I will read two verses from the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. One verse is from kind of closer to the beginning, from the 9th chapter, and another verse is from the very end of this chapter. And we'll try to explain how these two verses more or less describe the purpose or the essential message of this canto. So first we read the verse number 47 from the 9th chapter of the 9th canto, the dynasty of Amshuman. Adhesha maya rachiteshu sangam guneshu Gandharva puropatmeshu Rudham prakrityatmani vishvakartur bhavena hitva tamaham prapadye. Atha, therefore, Ishamaya, by the external potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Rachiteshu, in things manufactured, Sangam, attachment, Guneshu, in the modes of material nature, Gandharva Pura Upameshu, which are compared to the illusion of Gandharva Pura, a town or houses seen in the forest or in a hill. Rudham, very powerful. Prakritya, by material nature. Atmani, into the super soul. Vishvakartu, of the creator of the whole universe. Bhavena, by devotional service. Hitva, giving up. Tam, unto him the Lord. Aham, I, prapadye, surrender. Translation. Therefore I should now give up my attachment for things created by the external energy of the Supreme Personality of God. I should engage in thought of the Lord and should thus surrender unto him. This material creation, having been created by the external energy of the Lord, is like an imaginary town visualized on a hill or in a forest. Every conditioned soul has a natural attraction and attachment for material things, but one must simply give up this attachment and surrender unto the Supreme Personality of God. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vijnana Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. When passing through a mountainous region in an airplane, one may sometimes see a city in the sky with towers and palaces, or one may see similar things in a big forest. This is called a Gandharva Pura, a phantasmagoria. This entire world resembles such a phantasmagoria, and every materially situated person has attached for it. But Katwanga Maharaja, because of his advanced Krishna consciousness, was not interested in such things. Even though a devotee may engage in apparently materialistic activities, he knows his position very well. Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yuktam Vairagyam Uchyate. If one engages in material things in relation with the loving service of the Lord, one is situated in Yukta Vairagya, proper renunciation. In this material world, nothing should be accepted for one's sense gratification. Everything should be accepted for the service of the Lord. This is the mentality of the spiritual world. Maharaja Katwanga advises that one give up material attachment and surrender unto the Supreme Personality of God. Thus, one achieves success in life. This is pure Bhakti Yoga, which involves Vairagya Vidya, renunciation and knowledge. Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga, Shikshartam Eka, Purushah Puranaha, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Sharira Dhari Kripam Budhir Yastamaham Prapadye. Let me surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has appeared now as Lord Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. is the ocean of all mercy and has come down to teach us material detachment, learning, and devotional service to himself. Chaitanya Chandradaya Natak. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu inaugurated this movement of Vairagya Vidya, by which one detaches himself from material existence and engages in loving devotional service. The Krishna consciousness movement of devotional service is the only process by which to counteract our false prestige in this material world. So that's the first verse, and the verse at the very end of this canto from the 25th chapter, entitled Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, verse number 62 sounds Yasmin Satkarna Piyushe Yashastirthavare Sakrit Shrotanjali Rupashritya Dhunute Karma Vasanam. Very important verse from this 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Simply by receiving the glories of the Lord through purified transcendental ears, Satkarna Piyushe, the devotees of the Lord are immediately freed, sakrit, from strong material desires, karma vasana, dunute karma vasana. They are totally purified. And engagement in fruitive activities. Purport by His Divine Grace, Sri Bhakti Vijnana Goswami Prabhupada. When the devotees orally receive the activities of the Lord, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as enacted in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, they immediately achieve the transcendental vision in which they are no longer interested in materialistic activities. Thus, they achieve freedom from the material world. For sense gratification, practically everyone is engaged in materialistic activities which prolong the process of Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi, birth, death, old age, and disease. But the devotee, simply by hearing the message of Bhagavad Gita and further relishing the narrations of Srimad Bhagavatam, becomes so pure that he no longer takes interest in materialistic activities. At the moment, devotees in Western countries are being attracted to Krishna by Krishna consciousness and becoming uninterested in materialistic activities, and therefore people are trying to oppose this movement. But they cannot possibly check this movement or stop the activities of the devotees in Europe and America by their artificial impositions. Here the words Shrotanjali Rupashritya indicate that simply by hearing the transcendental activities of the Lord, the devotees become so pure that they are immediately immune to the contamination of materialistic fruitive activities. Anya vilasita shunyam. Materialistic activities are unnecessary for the soul, and therefore the devotees are freed from such activities. The devotees are situated in liberation, Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate, and therefore they cannot be called back to their material homes and materialistic activities. Srila Prabhupada. Okay. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschapyade Shakarini Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Devacha Patidanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Ajanuvandita Pujo Panakavadatu Sankirtana Ekapitaro Kamalaya Taksu Vishwambaro Vijavaro Yugadharma Pavande Jagatya Karo Karunavataro Yantah pravishya mama vachim imam prasuptam sanjeevayata kila shakti darak swadhamna anyamscha hasta charana shravana tvakadim pranannamo bhagavate purushaya tubhyam swasyastu vishwasya kalah prasidatam jayantu bhutani shivam mitho dhiya manascha badram bhajata tadokshaja aveshyatam namati atyahayati. Hare Krishna. Yes, we had a long separation with Srimad Bhagavatam, but I really hope that you continued your journey throughout the narrations of Srimad Bhagavatam. And as I said many times, the main idea of this seminar, of these talks, is to explain how each and every canto of Srimad Bhagavatam brings us closer and ultimately contributes to our understanding of the 10th canto. Because the subject matter of the 10th canto, with its apparent simplicity, is actually very, very difficult to understand properly. And therefore, the proper reading of Srimad Bhagavatam, with proper understanding of the drive of the narration of Srimad Bhagavatam, will help us ultimately to appreciate the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and become attached to them. So as I said, the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, in this regard, in trying to separate a very simple and essential message, is the most difficult. If we look at this of this 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam from the first glance, we will see a kaleidoscope of completely different stories. And most of the stories are very, how shall I say this, scandalous by nature. It's really a collection of different transcendental scandals. Starting from the very beginning of the 9th canto, where all of a sudden Sudyumna becomes woman, and not only he becomes woman, and he becomes, half man, half woman, 1 month woman, 1 month man, and then he gives birth to children in both bodies. He begets children as the male, as Sudyumna, and he becomes pregnant. I don't know how he managed with this 1 month, to give birth to a child. But it's a quite far out story. So to start with, and then we see, it's not the end of it, it's the only beginning. Then, one king kills the cow, and, accidentally, and his guru curses him without any reason. And then not only this, later, guru curses his disciple Nimi, and Nimi curses his guru back. It's very, and then there is all kinds of sexual, improper sexual behavior described in this canto, like Brihaspati is stealing the wife of his brother and impregnates her while she's pregnant, and, all kinds of stories. So how to make sense of all these stories, and somebody kidnaps Brahmana girl, somebody becomes man-eater, because of the curse of his guru. Again, without much reason, somebody eats a rabbit in the forest. So this look like yellow newspaper. I can say just by the external look at and when I first read it, the impression which I have sounds very much like ISKCON. so many different things is going on. And I was right, actually. It was, my conclusion was correct. Actually, 9th Canto of Srimad Bhagavatam has a very deep and important and merciful message to all of us. And I think we will be benefited if we try to carefully read this canto. I remember when I was pondering over the meaning or essential meaning of this canto, I asked one Bhakti Vedanta, Bhakti Vaibhav teacher, one very quite prominent preacher in ISKCON, and asked him, what is the essential message? Can you tell me? He said, he smiled and he said, there is no essential message. But I was not, somehow or other, I was not satisfied with such conclusion. And I thought that we should try, nevertheless, despite of this apparent chaos of different small stories, try to find the purport or import of all these stories, which would make sense of all of them. Besides, of course, as I already said, besides the storyline, which is very clear in this canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Shukadev Goswami describes the Sun Dynasty and the history of different kings of Sun Dynasty in the first 13 chapters, and the last 11 chapters he describes the Moon Dynasty, the Soma Vamsha. So let's begin to disentangle or unravel all these mysteries of this beautiful canto, really beautiful canto. So for that, to really clearly understand what is the place of this canto in our life, not in Srimad Bhagavatam only, but what is this place of these stories in our life, let's go back to our description of the progression of Srimad Bhagavatam and remember what we have told so far. So first two cantos is, of course, introduction to the whole book. And the first canto describes the method of understanding of Srimad Bhagavatam, the methodology of hearing and receiving Srimad Bhagavatam properly from the proper speaker, and therefore describes the qualifications of the hearers and the speakers of Srimad Bhagavatam. Second canto describes the history of Srimad Bhagavatam, how Srimad Bhagavatam was appeared in this world and how it was transmitted from the Supreme Lord himself to Lord Brahma, from Brahma to Narada, and so on and so forth. And also the sadhana of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is again explained there as the highest possible spiritual practice, as the highest possible spiritual discipline. So this first chapters, first two cantos are more or less introduction, which is supposed to bring us into proper mood of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, understanding the importance of this process and this book. So then, starting with the third canto, we start with Sarga, with the creation of this world. And while describing the creation of this world, very important message is being transmitted to us, that this material creation is created by the Lord for the salvation of the conditioned souls. That it's not just accidental. It's not just, a result of being bang, something made bang and, the big explosion, and here we are, result of this big explosion. No, there is a very careful design within this world, and this world is designed for enjoyment of the souls and for sufferings of the souls, to teach us very important lesson. And the most important lesson which is there is to actually make us apathetic to the enjoyment of this world, make us free, or help us to free from the greed. The message of the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, or the story, the central story of the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, fighting between Hiranyaksha and Lord Varahadev, is about this. Hiranyaksha is this primordial greed personified. Greed for material enjoyment, and every living entity comes to this material world with this greed and wants to enjoy, up to the possible limits, and therefore suffers in this material world, and so on and so forth. So, the attempts, the futility of the attempts of the conditioned soul to enjoy in this material world is being beautifully described in this third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. By the means of this Sankhya philosophy, and how this world is created, and how scientists are trying to facilitate our enjoyment, but ultimately it's not possible. So that's the message of the third canto. Then the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, as we explained, is this clash between the so-called pious Vedic enjoyments and renunciation of the world. These two tendencies are there. People who understand that the way to live in this material world is to follow Vedas, to perform sacrifices, as was described in the third canto by the personality, or by the figure of Varahadev, who is the Vedic sacrifice personified. So, then they try to live happy in this world by following Vedas, but this is not possible at all again. And Srimad Bhagavatam, fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, is giving us this message. Please read this canto and understand that all your attempts to become happy through the Vedic subtle sciences are also condemned and futile. They are not going to give you desired happiness. So that's the fourth canto. Fifth canto, as I explained, was about the borders, how we should be situated properly according to our position in this world, and perform our duties, but at the same time internally develop bhakti, or develop attachment or devotion to the Supreme Lord. That's the place of the stanam. Fifth canto is stanam. Atra sarga visargascha stanam poshanam utaya. Then poshanam, sixth canto. Sixth canto is the nourishment, or the mercy of the Lord, how the living entities are nourished, and how actually everyone is dependent on the mercy of the Lord. The pure devotees and not so pure devotees. So sixth canto is about mixed devotion as opposed to the pure devotion, and the glory of pure devotion, how the only pure devotees get the full mercy and full nourishment, whereas those who are trying to combine devotion with their attempts to enjoy this material world ultimately baffled. So that's the message of the 6th canto, Poshanam. Mixed devotees are demigods and they are fighting with Vritrasura, who is a demon, but at the same time, he is a pure devotee and he gets the real mercy of the Lord, whereas demigods remain here and still continue struggling for existence. So then 7th canto is very simple because there's only 2 big parts, the Prahlad Charita, the story of Prahlad and his demonic father. So that's Uti. What is this very strong impetus within ourselves which makes us, to be devoted to the Lord or to be opposed to the Lord? Why these 2 natures are there? And the message of the 7th canto is, of course, by associating with devotees, we become devotees. And by associating with non-devotees, we become demonic. We develop our demonic nature. And therefore, Varnashrama is also there as the very strong mechanism to bring us closer to the association of devotees. That's actually the essence of Varnashrama. Varnashrama, the value of Varnashrama is not about following the rules and regulations. Also, it is also important too. But the value of Varnashrama is to bring us closer to the society of devotees and ultimately make us surrender to the spiritual master. So that's 7th canto. 8th canto, which we described last time, is the signs of surrender and different kinds of surrender. Is there pure surrender and motivated, materially motivated surrender is described in the 8th canto. So that's the journey so far, and it's very logical. We can see that this whole world is created for the benefit of the conditioned souls, and Srimad Bhagavatam is describing the gradual progression of the conditioned soul. A conditioned soul opens Srimad Bhagavatam and somehow or other is fortunate enough to get a complete set of Srimad Bhagavatam and goes through it. And this is what is supposed to take place within our heart. One after another, very gross desires, gross anarthas will be deactivated by the mercy of Shukadeva Goswami. Shukadeva Goswami is bringing us closer and closer to the Supreme Lord. So up to the point of surrender, and 8th canto is actually the point when the conditioned soul is ready to surrender. And therefore, Shukadeva Goswami explains, this is how you should surrender. You should surrender like Bali Maharaj. You should not surrender like other heroes of the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. The pure surrender, not like demigods in the manthana, in the churning of the milk ocean, not like Aditi, and all this conditioned surrender is actually not recommended. But the pure surrender of Bali Maharaj is the message of the 8th canto. So if we remember this design, so what is the message, essential message of the 9th canto? Obviously, what we do after surrender. After surrender, we start devotional service. Surrender or Sharanagati is the beginning point, starting point of devotional service. So one very simple answer to the question which we asked in the beginning, what is the essential message? The essential message is Bhajana Kriya. Surrender basically means that we develop faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Shraddha is Sharanapati Lakshana, as Bhakti Vijnana Thakur says. So after this, we should start devotional service, and definitely there is ample of proof that this is essential or feature of this 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, especially because 3 verses from the 4th chapter of the 9th canto is very much, very often quoted by Srila Prabhupada and all the acharyas as the example of regulated devotional service. These are famous verses describing the devotion of Maharaja Ambarish. Savai Manah Krishna Padara Nindayor Vachamsi Vaikuntha Gunanu Varnane Karo Hare Mandira Marjanadi Shrutim Chakarachyuta Sat Kathoda Ye Mukunda Lingalaya Darshane Drisho Tadbritya Gatra Sparshenga Sangamam Grahanam Tatpada Saroja Soradhe Srimat Tulasya Rasanam Tadarpite Pado Hare Kshetra Padanusarpane Shiro Krishikesha Padabhi Vandane Kaman Chadasye Natukama Kamyaya Yatotama Shloka Janashrayarati. So these 3 verses, they explain how to develop rati or real attachment to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Uttama Shloka by engaging all the senses, starting with Savai Manah Krishna Padara Vindayor Vachamsi Vaikuntha Gunanu Varnane, how he engaged his mind by thinking about lotus feet of the Lord, and how he engaged his tongue or his speech by describing the Lord of Vaikuntha and his qualities, Vaikuntha Gunanu Varnane. Karo Harer, how he engaged his hands by cleaning the temple of the Lord, and how he engaged his hearing propensity, so his hearing sense, by listening about the Lord, and how he engaged his eyes by seeing Mukunda Linga in the temple, the form of the Lord of Mukunda, and how he was associating with devotees, and in this way engaged his skin, his sense of touch in the service of the Lord, and his sense of smell by smelling the tulsi and the smell which is coming from the lotus feet of the Lord, and how he engaged his legs and his head by bowing down to the Lord. And he was doing it not because he wanted to engage enjoy his senses, but because he wanted to achieve the attachment to the Lord. Very, very important point. Why are we doing all these activities? Because ultimately we want to achieve this state when our heart is attached to the Lord and not to anything else. And therefore we engage all our senses in a very positive way, not to renounce, but to engage it in a very positive way. So that's the first preliminary answer what is the message of this canto. But it's actually, there is more to it. So yes, it's bhajana kriya with all the glories of bhajana kriya and with all the problems which we all experience. Actually, again, looking at glance to this canto, we will be able to recognize the difficulties which we ourselves experience. It sounds very simple, just engage your nose and smelling tulsi leaves and engage your eyes and looking at the Lord. Yes, I engage my eyes and my nose for 2 minutes a day. And smelling and seeing the Lord, and then and the rest, I'm still looking at this world, and still the same lust is there. So therefore, one can say that this canto is explaining the internal battle while we are engaged in the service of the Lord, while we are trying to engage our senses in the service of the Lord, but at the same time, we feel that there is a pulling, that we are being torn, and we're being, torn apart, and there is a very strong pulling which forces us to again go back to the materialistic activities and materialistic sense gratification. So that's again the first answer, what the ninth canto is all about. And we know that according to this Krama theory, and the ninth canto is Ishanukatha. And that's very clearly confirmed by the ninth canto itself, by Maharaja Parikshit. In the very beginning of the ninth canto, he asked Shukadev Goswami, "Dear Shukadev Goswami, you explained to me Manvantara in a very beautiful way. But now, Tesham Vamsham Prithah Brahman, O Brahman, please explain to me different Vamsha. Vamsha Anucharitani Cha, Kirtayasu Mahabhaha, Nityam Shushru Shatam Hina." Yeah, I'm very much eager to hear this Vamsha Anucharita, or Ishanukatha, as it is said in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Atra sarga visargascha sthanam poshanam utaya manvantar Ishanukatha. Signs of God, as Prabhupada translates this phrase, Ishanukatha. So this is Vamshanucharita, describing the character of different Vamshas. Why? Because Ishanukatha is not only about Isha, it's about the devotees of the Lord. So again, very important point. The ninth canto is describing Ishanukatha by describing the stories of different devotees of the Lord. And while describing the stories of different devotees of the Lord, Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport, he makes the point which I already made in the beginning. It should always be remembered that the material creation is created for the salvation of the conditioned soul. The merciful Lord, out of his causeless mercy, descends to various planets of the material world and acts for the salvation of the conditioned soul. That makes the history and narrations worth reading. Srimad Bhagavatam offers such transcendental topics of the Lord in relationship with great devotees. Therefore, the topics of devotees and the Lord are to be given respectful reception. So, one more important point, which explains the message of the ninth canto. Yes, it's about the devotional service, and the main part of devotional service is to hear about the Lord and to hear about the devotees of the Lord. So therefore, the ninth canto not only explains the importance of devotional service, but it also engages us in this devotional service by describing activities of different devotees of the Lord. And this is exactly explained by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in this in commentary to this verse of the second canto. We're now describing the second canto, which explains what is this Ishanukatha. The avatars and their devotees should be heard about and glorified. Thus, in the material world, Sthiti, the devotional angas of hearing and chanting of the sadhakas, devotees are described. In other words, again, ninth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam engages us in this different stories about the devotees of the Lord. and helps us by describing these stories to also overcome certain difficulties which we have. We should understand that all these devotees, which are described in the ninth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, with all the strange things, which they do, they're all great devotees. It's very interesting. In the ninth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, I believe it's in the, I don't remember in which chapter, but it doesn't really matter. Maharaja Parikshit hears how Shukadev Goswami said that one of the kings of the solar dynasty became a man-eater, Rakshasa. And not only he became a man-eater, his name is Kalmashapada. Not only he became a man-eater, he also ate a Brahman. And not only he ate a Brahmana, he ate a Brahmana who was engaged in sexual intercourse with his wife. And not only he ate a Brahmana who was engaged in sexual intercourse with his wife, he didn't even really pay attention to the pitiful plea of the wife of this Brahmana, who said, "Let me become impregnated first, and then you eat him." Don't do it right away. Wait. But he was so eager to eat him that he just couldn't wait. So he ate him, and then Maharaja Parikshit asked, "Can you explain a little more details about this great soul?" He calls him Mahatma. Can you please explain to me what happened with this Mahatma? By the name Sodasa. So that's a very important point of this ninth canto. We have to understand this. They're all Mahatmas. And why? Because they all engaged in devotional service, because they all somehow or other connected with the Supreme Lord. And yes, they may do something which externally may be quite abominable, but still, it's a very important lesson for us. If we want to understand the message of ninth canto, this is one of the essential features of this message. We should understand that whoever is engaged in devotional service, despite of all the difficulties which he undergoes, despite of all the failures and problems which he may have on the way, he should be considered as Mahatma. All the scandals which are described here is actually described in a very compassionate way so that we could make conclusions and not commit the same mistakes. But at the same time, we should also understand that the mistakes committed by devotees are not really mistakes. Sometimes, especially nowadays with this culture of Facebook and everything else, people, they just condemning devotees left and right. But Shukadev Goswami is not in favor of this. And Maharaja Parikshit is definitely not in favor of this. We may be very happy that devotees, do mistakes and because of our fault-finding mentality, and try to describe them in a very denigrating way. Shukadev Goswami is describing it in a completely different way. Yes, somebody may not follow very strictly four regulative principles, but I don't think that any devotees of ISKCON would eat Brahman. I don't think it went to the, they may eat some, maybe, I don't know, somebody else, but not Brahman. At least that much respect to Brahminical culture we all have. So that's a very important lesson which we should see, and that this stories is not about others. These stories are told by Shukadev Goswami for us. and they're told with in a very compassionate way, so that we could make really, derive very important lessons from these stories. And therefore, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, by explaining what is the message of ninth canto, in the very beginning of ninth canto, he says that ninth canto speaks about three things. It speaks about, he says, Sadharma has been described. Now the ninth canto, topics related to the followers of the Lord, Ishanupatha, are told with the intention of propagating Bhakti, Vijnana, and Vairagya. So that's another important point for us to understand. The ninth canto, the stories of ninth canto, if we read them properly, are supposed to create bhakti within ourselves. And they're supposed to give us vijnana, which means experience. It means that basically that experience means that, by reading these stories, we will be free from all these foolish tendencies, and we will be free from these mistakes. That's vijnana. We don't have to commit the same mistakes. It's just enough to read the ninth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And we're done with many, many stuff. And then Vairagya. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that the story of Maharaja Ambarish is about bhakti, and is supposed to create bhakti within our heart, the desire to have bhakti. And then the story of King Yayati and his desperate attempts to enjoy this material world is supposed to create or impregnate our heart with vairagya, with the detachment of the world. So, and the rest of the stories, he gives the example of these two stories, but the rest of the stories, many of the stories, is about vijnana, is about this experience. So you read these stories carefully, and then you make a conclusion whether I want to do the same or I don't want. So that's another level in our consideration. What is the main message of the ninth canto? It's not it. It's not yet it. So we first said that this is, generally describing the process of devotional service, regulated devotional service, bhajana kriya, for those people who already surrendered, but still have some problems and attachments. And who doesn't? It's an exception, not the rule, that somebody starts devotional service, he has some internal problems still, despite his surrender. Arjuna himself says, Shishyasteham sadimam tvam prapanam, and then he says, Nayotsyaiti Govinda, I'm surrendered soul, but I'm not going to fight. So that's exactly what is described in the ninth canto. Yes, you surrender, you start devotional service, but very soon you will encounter with impediments inside. And these internal impediments inevitably will take shape of the external circumstances. And by going through these external circumstances, you will be able to overcome these internal impediments. That's how this material world is created. So this is the ninth canto. It's about the devotional service, about the problems which we encounter in devotional service, and about hearing as the means to develop it. And by hearing, we develop bhakti, vijnana, and vairagya. Going automatically through this, very fast track. We don't have to do everything ourselves. We don't need to be Brahmana to understand that nothing good will happen after doing this. So, okay, so, but then I think there is something more to say about the essential message of the ninth canto. If we carefully look in these stories one after another, we will also derive a very interesting lesson which is being taught by Shukadeva Goswami in this canto. Let's go a little bit, story after story. Of course, I will not be able to describe the details of the story. So, first chapter is Sudyumna becomes a woman, and Pururava is born from this Ila. Sudyumna becomes Ila, and then Ila becomes Sudyumna, and then Sudyumna becomes Ila, and at one point, Buddha becomes attracted by Ila, and in this way, Pururava is born the forefather of the Moon dynasty. And then Prisarda, King Prisarda from the Sun dynasty, kills a cow, and Vasishta curses him without any reason, his spiritual master. And then he, despite this curse of his spiritual master, he starts engaging in devotional service, and somehow or other, he was supposed to become a Chandala in the next life, because Shudra in the next life, because of the curse of Vasishta. And Vasishta is a powerful saint, and whatever he says must come true. But Prisarda, instead of this, he becomes a pure devotee and goes to Vaikuntha without, shortcutting this this way of becoming Shudra. So then Sukanya, she marries Chyavana Rishi, and she's following her dharma very carefully. This young girl, all of a sudden, she becomes a wife of a very old man. But then still, she keeps dharma. She follows him very faithfully, and she becomes protected. And then Ambarish Maharaja, we will describe a little later, because this is a central story of the whole ninth canto. His encounter, and again, he's saved by his bhakti. And then Vichukshi eats rabbit in the forest, and he's again protected by the Lord. Yuvanashva, he's protected by the Lord because of his devotion, even though he drinks the water which was supposed to be drank by his wife, and because he drank the water which was supposed to be drank by his wife, he becomes pregnant. And he gives birth from his right how you call this, right part of his belly. He gives birth to Mandhata, and Mandhata is saved. Harishchandra, his difficult life, how he developed dropsy, and how he's supposed to sacrifice his own son, and he's protected. And then but then sons of Sagar were not protected, but Amsuman protected them. Advent of Ganga, Nimi is protected, and Lord Ramachandra. So this, if we take the first 13 chapter of this canto, very important message repeated again and again and again. You may commit mistakes. You will encounter casualties in this material world. All of a sudden, Durvasa Muni will come to you, or something else will happen to you, or you will eat rabbit, or you will drink water which you're not supposed to drink. This world is a very dangerous place. Very important message is being sent to us, even if you are pure devotee. Ambarish Maharaj was a pure devotee. Still, he was a pure devotee, totally innocent. Still, he encountered this very difficult situation with Durvasa Muni. So another very important message about the devotional service: difficulties will be there. For sure, 100%. Don't say that you were not warned from the very beginning, because sometimes devotees have this very idealistic and very naive understanding. I became a devotee, now my life should be very easy. You became a devotee, now your life will be really difficult. Because you will have to go through all these difficulties to really encounter what is inside, all the problems which are there inside. You will have to, through this very fast track of bhakti yoga, you will have to really deal with all these problems. And therefore, these problems will come as external obstacles to you. Impediments will be there. But if you continue practicing your bhakti, you will be protected at the end. That's a very essential message of Srimad Bhagavatam. Be careful, this world is a dangerous place. You will encounter difficulties because these difficulties are inside you, but you will overcome these difficulties at the end. You have to have this. This is a very, liberating message of the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. We have to have this faith that, yes, difficulties will be there, but I will come out victorious of all these difficulties. Like Maharaja Ambarish came out victorious, even though it was so difficult. It was unbelievably difficult. And without apparent reason, Durvasa Muni became angry at him. So that's a very important thing. And what it means, please listen very carefully, because that's a real, very important, essential message of the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. What it means to remain a devotee in the difficulties. Because, we all, sooner or later, we will face some very important difficulties which are needed to us, which are specifically designed to free us from certain internal problems. So the difficult lesson of this 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, we should remain undisturbed and dependent on the Lord. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes, and it not only happened with neophyte devotees, it happened with very advanced devotees. They develop some doubts about the Lord. When the crisis comes to our life, inevitably some doubts will come. Why Lord allowed it to happen? What did I do? I only served Him. I chanted all the rounds. I preached His glory. I did this. I did that. Why did it happen to me? Why did it happen to me? So the very important lesson of this 4th chapter of the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, story of Ambarish Maharaja, is that despite of all the difficulties, we have to be, we have to continue to be dependent on the Lord. So what will happen if we continue with complete faith, being dependent on the Lord becomes dependent on us. That's extremely important message or teachings of the Srimad Bhagavatam, of the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, this series of verses from the verse number 63 from the 4th chapter of this canto, when the Lord Narayan speaks to Durvasa Muni, and he says, Aham bhakta paradhino hyasvatantra ivadvija sadubir grasta hridayo bhakta janapriyaha. Please listen, because we're coming now to the core of this message. Krishna says, Sri Bhagavan Vacha, Aham Bhakta Paradhino, I'm dependent on my Bhakta. I'm not dependent, I am obedient to my Bhakta. Paradhina. I will do whatever he tells me to do. He asvatantra iva, as if I'm not svatantra. I'm dependent on him. And when Durvasa Muni says, okay, but you also like brahmanas, I'm a brahman. Are you not merciful to me? He says, no, I'm not merciful to you because I don't have heart. He says, how come you don't have heart? He said, because my heart is the property of my devotees. My devotees, sadubir grasta hridayo, they took my heart. I'm not, I cannot decide anymore what I'm supposed to do because they possess my heart. And I'm not only dependent on them, but I'm only dependent on those. I'm not only dependent on the devotees who depended on me. I'm not only reciprocating with them, but I'm reciprocating even with those people who make themselves dependent on my devotees. Bhakta Bhakta Janapriya. In other words, if we remain chaste and faithful in the difficulties, if we remain faithful either to the Lord or to his devotees, if we continue with this mood, or if we maintain this mood, no matter what happens with me, I should be chaste to the devotees. I should continue depending on them and on their mercy. Then the Lord, as he says, Aham Bhakta Paradino Hyasvatantri. I will protect. I will give them protection. So, and then he says, Sadavo Hridayam Mahyam Sadunam Hridayam Tvaham Matanyat Tena Janati Naham Tevyo Managati. So my heart is with the devotees, and devotees' heart is in me. And they don't know anything besides me, and I don't know anyone besides them. So that's the glorious reciprocation. In other words, there will be difficulties. So when there is a difficulty, don't try to depend on yourself. Try to continue depending on the Lord and on the devotees, even though there will be a very strong desire to give up depending on the Lord and try to protect yourself. Try to depend on your strengths, on your intelligence, on your money, on your connections, on whatever else is there. Don't make this mistake. If you tolerate the difficulty by continuing complete dependence on the Lord, saying, my dear Lord, crying, my dear Lord, please, 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 please protect me. He will protect me. So, and then the next story, in the 6th chapter of this canto, is a very good illustration of what happens with somebody who is not dependent on the Lord, but is very powerful. Which story it is? From the 9th canto? It's a story of Sobari Muni. Sobari Muni was a very powerful yogi. He was not protected by them. Why? Because he was not seeking the protection of the Lord, because he was not dependent on the Lord. He was not developing this this mood of complete dependence on the Lord, and because sometimes we feel that surrender is just one-time action. I surrender. I already have my beads and my name. I am Dasa. Hare Krishna. No, surrender is the ongoing process. And what is regulated devotional service? Regulated devotional service is to deepen our surrender more and more and more, to deepen our dependence on the Lord more and more and more. And that's what is depicted in all these stories. And Sobari Muni, he was not dependent on the Lord. Therefore, when the sexual intercourse, he has seen the sexual intercourse between the fishes. I don't know what is so, so attractive. But, he's such a yogi, sitting there in the depths of Yamuna in the holy river, and still he became attracted. Because of asatsanga, because of this, because the samskaras are there. So what happens during the devotional service, samskaras, when we practice devotional service, Savai Manah Krishna Padara Vindayor, according to Ambarish Maharaj, one after another, samskaras will surface. And they're powerful. And they will try to pull us in different directions. So what we're supposed to do? We're supposed to continue depending on the Lord with more and more and more sincerity. And therefore, all these stories are there. Vikukshi eats rabbit, and Lord protects him. Yuvanashva is protected by the Lord. Mandhata, little baby, was protected by the Lord. And Harishchandra is protected by the Lord, ultimately, despite of all the difficulties. And all these things, and Maharaja Nini. So all these stories about the casualties and about the problems which we encounter, and about complete dependence during the stories of the Lord, and how ultimately the Lord saves. That's the first 13th chapter of this book, a little more than a half of the book. And then starting from the 14th chapter, the story of Moon Dynasty starts. And the stories are somewhat different. So there's two big parts of this book. First about the moon, first about the Sun dynasty, and the culmination of Sun dynasty is Lord Ramachandra. And we know Lord Ramachandra, he is Maryada Purushottama, he is the manifestation of this discipline, the spirit of discipline, the devotional service according to the rules and regulations and Dharma. So the stories of the first chapter is very much about this reciprocation with the Lord and protection from the Lord by following strictly the duties of devotional service. But then starting from the 14th chapter, very interesting, different mood of the stories. First is Pururava and Urvashi, far out love story. Really such a powerful love story. How Urvashi, because of the curse, developed kind of cravings, and she wanted to experience the, not heavenly enjoyments, but earthly enjoyments. And sometimes we know what it means. Sometimes we want, this sort of thing, and it's not only curse. It's probably this sort of anartha was there, and Pururava, they were perfect match to each other, and but then she left despite of this total, complete, astrological compatibility. The astrologers told them that you have ideal marriage life, and then this ideal marriage life didn't last long because of the Gandharvas. Interesting stories. And then Pururava starts this yagyas, and that was in the beginning of Treta Yuga. And then Parashurama, far out story about Parashuram, how Parashuram kills Kartaviri Arjuna, and how his sons, Kartaviri Arjuna's sons, kills Parashurama's father, Jamadagni, and how before that, Jamadagni orders Parashurama to kill his mother, to kill his wife or mother of Parashurama, how Parashurama kills his mother and all his brothers. And then, and ask Jamadagni, can you survive? Can you somehow resurrect them and make them alive again? And please make them not remember who killed them. So kind of, again, this, this stories continue, but perhaps without this, in the first part, there is always this protection of the Lord. But in the second part, there's not much of this. There is really, and then Yaiti and Devayani and Sharmishta, this story about King Yaiti, how he fell in love with Sukracharya's daughter, and how Sukracharya's daughter, being cursed by Kacha, fell in love with him, and how again he was cursed by his own father-in-law. So what is the message of this second part? The message of the second part is extremely important. And then Dushmanta, Shakuntala, Rantide. The message of the second part of this ninth canto is basically, this is one of the essential features of this ninth canto, is not to underestimate the power of lust. Because sometimes we as neophyte devotees, we may feel that I'm completely free from lust. Once there was a story, a brahmachari came to Srila Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, I'm completely free from lust. And Prabhupada says, maybe we should call a doctor. So basically, that's the message of this ninth canto. Don't think that you're free from lust. If Yaiti Maharaj was not free from lust, if Pururava or Urvashi were not free from lust, if they were all not free from lust, if Brihaspati was not free, Guru of demigods was not free from lust, who you think you are to be free from lust? And a very essential, very interesting idea is there when Yaiti Maharaj asked his sons, his 5 sons, to exchange his old age with their youth, according to the blessings of his father-in-law, Shukracharya. So the first one is Yadu Maharaj. And what Yadu Maharaj says, no, I'm not going to give you my youth. And he says, why? Because I have material desires. And if I give you my youth, and you give me your old age, and I will experience these material desires in my old age, how I will be able to do devotional service? Please listen very, very carefully. And Yadu Maharaj is so, his decision in this difficult situation is glorified. The Lord himself, Lord Krishna himself, decides to become one of the descendants of Yadu, takes birth in Yadu dynasty because Yadu Maharaj came to this very proper conclusion. This life is meant for devotional service, and I have to utilize the energy of this life in for devotional service. And and I have to go through, and I have to really overcome all these desires to be concentrated on devotional service. So the second part of the ninth canto has an important message to all of us, that the main difficulty in the devotional service is sex. It may take some time before the lust, or before this powerful force within ourselves will become completely calm and completely controlled. We should not underestimate the power of this karma, of this lust within ourselves. And we should definitely engage all our propensities in devotional service. Ultimately, this lust will be conquered by the power of devotional service. But we should not be how to say this, neglectful or overconfident that we will be able to do it very quickly. Our dependence on the Lord, which I was talking about in the example of the story of Maharaja Ambarish and Durvasa Muni, is entirely is about this. We should be dependent on the Lord to overcome this powerful force within ourselves, which is called lust or karma. And so then in the last part of this ninth canto, Srila Shukadev Goswami starts explaining the histories or dynasties of all the prominent kings which were there together with Krishna. All the dynasties of Sattvatas and Andakas and Vrishnis, and the descendants of Puru Maharaj, son of Yayati, who agreed to give his use to his father, and how Pandavas ultimately came to this world. But before that, it's very interesting. Let's go back a little bit into the story of Yayati and Sharmishta and Devayani. We know this very important and beautiful story, how Yayati, after regaining his youth and after engaging in sensual activities for many, many years, for 1,000 years, having all the resources, having all the facilities, how he ultimately became very, very frustrated, and how he started saying, that there is no point of trying to pacify lust. That lust is insatiable. Najatu kama kamanam upabhogena shamyati harisha Krishna vartmeva bhuya eva bivardate. The more you try to feed your lust, the more it becomes it's insatiable, and the fire of lust, Krishna Vartma, fire is called here Krishna Vartma, he becomes more and more blazing within our heart. Bhuya eva bivardate. It's just the lust becomes more and more and more. Even if you have everything in your facilities, if you have all the riches and all the everything, you will never be able to satisfy lust. So that's a very important lesson which Maharaja Yayati is teaching us according to through his life. Just 1 second. And then the wrong conclusion which we can make by reading this story is that, okay, fine, I understood. Now I have to enjoy. And then after 1,000 years or so, I may become totally, completely frustrated. And then I come to the same conclusion. And then, you know, I will start my devotional service. So is this the teaching of this 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam? No, of course not. So the teaching is very interesting. And we would not be able to understand it if Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur would not explain why this all of a sudden this transformation took place in the heart of Maharaja Yayati. You know, for 1,000 years he was happily engaged in sense gratification, and then at the end he became very frustrated. Is it just the result of sense gratification? But he himself says, but you know, if you do this, the lust is not satisfied. Why this transformation took place in case of Maharaja Yayati? Very important thing. Now, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he brings these two parts of the 9th canto together. He says, let's count how many generations came from in this Sun dynasty from Brahma to Maharaja Ambarish. And he says it's he is the number 7. No, number 8. He's the number 8. Brahma, Marichi, Kashyapa, Vivaswan, Shraddhadev, Nabhaga, Nagava, Nabhaga, and Ambarish, number 8. And he said, let's count how many generations came from Yayati from this Moon dynasty. Again, Brahma, Atri, Chandra, Buddha, Pururava, Ayu, Manusha, Yayati. Yayati is number 8. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that Ambarish Maharaj and Yayati, they were contemporaries. They were ruling the world at the same time, and he explains that at that time, the ruler of the world of the 7 islands was Maharaja Ambarish, because it's clearly said there. And the ruler of Bharatavarsha within these 7 islands was the king of Moon dynasty, Soma Vamsha, Yayati. And Ambarish was his chief, was the emperor. And Yayati was his king. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, because of the influence of Maharaja Ambarish upon Yayati Maharaj, he became frustrated with this with this attempt to become happy in sensual enjoyment. And because of his influence of Maharaja Yayati upon Devayani, his wife, she became also frustrated, and she ultimately achieved liberation. So very important message of this 9th canto coming together, this 2 parts of 9th canto coming together, is that, yes, the main problem is lust, which we all have, which we all encounter. And the real solution for this problem is the association with devotees. And if we associate with devotees properly and become influenced by the power of devotees, if we become open and receptive to the power of their devotion, then we will be able to overcome lust. The complete dependence of Maharaja Ambarish from the Lord, depicted in this 9th canto, is the ideal. What if we don't have such dependence? What if we still have this important, this powerful impetus within? Yeah, well, we should associate with such people, and then this power will vanish. This power will ultimately be pacified, and then we will be able to come to the point where Krishna is waiting for us. So, and that's the last chapter of this canto, very important last chapter of this canto, and I will very briefly also say a few words about this important last chapter of the 9th canto, which actually very harmoniously brings us to the, gives us the key for understanding of the 10th canto. That's another little puzzle to answer this mystery. What is the message of the 9th canto ultimately? So, describing this moon and sun dynasties, he comes to this moon dynasty and explains about the kings, contemporary kings, Pandavas and Shishupal. What is the genealogy of Shishupal, and who is Bahlika, and who is Burishrava, and Bhishma and Shantanu, and all these stories which we partially know, which are in more details described in Mahabharata itself. And then ultimately he comes to Maharaja Vasudeva, father of Krishna, and he says that from Vasudeva, Krishna was born. And then at the very end, and we together at the beginning of this last lecture, we read the verse from the end of this 24th chapter of the 9th canto. Shukadeva Goswami starts describing why Krishna comes to this world. Why Krishna himself, God himself, comes to this world. What is the reason? What is the cause? Because sometimes people, they don't believe that Krishna is God himself. They argue that Vishnu is God. Or sometimes they say something else. They say that, Swayam Bhagavan is not the proof that Krishna is the original Bhagavan. But at the very end of the 9th canto, at the very end of the last chapter of the 9th canto, Shukadeva Goswami gives us the hint, which will help us to understand 10th canto properly. Because what is 10th canto? 10th canto is the description of the spiritual world. It's not a description of Krishna's avatar. Although superficially it may sound like, but ultimately it's the description of eternal lila, of nitya lila of Krishna. Not even killing of the demons is the most important feature, but his nitya lila, his ordinary lila, how he is related with Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda, and with his friends and with his girlfriends. This is all. This is the very unique message of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And we can only really understand this message of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam if we carefully read the very end of the 24th chapter. In the beginning of this end, of this very last section of the 4th chapter, of 24th chapter, after describing all the dynasties, basically, and saying that Krishna was born from Vasudeva and Devaki, Sukadeva Goswami says, Yada yada hi dharmasya. Does it sound familiar to you? Yada yada hi dharmasya kshayo vridhischa papmanaha tadatu bhagavan isha atmanam srijate harihi. Whenever the principles of religion deteriorate and the principles of irreligion increase, yada yada hi dharmasya kshayaha vridhischa papmanaha, that the sinful tendencies become very prominent. The Supreme Lord, the controller, manifests his form. Tadatu Bhagavan Isha Atmanam Srijate Harihi. He says this, and he waits for our reaction. And when we say this, oh yes, okay, I understood everything. I understood why Krishna has come to this world. Okay, we will understand the message of the 10th canto in one way. Yes, the Lord comes, and sometimes he comes himself, sometimes he comes in this avatar, that avatar, and Krishna is one of his avatars. And he says, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirvavati bharata kshayo vridhischa papmana tadatut bhagavanisha atmanam srijate. So, but this is not what Sukadeva Goswami wants to say. It's just ordinary understanding. And for people who want to maintain this ordinary understanding that the Lord comes to side with the pious people, paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chadushkritam, and to kill the miscreants, this verse is there in Bhagavad Gita and in Srimad Bhagavatam. Then he says next, in the next verse, he gives another reason. He actually contradicts himself. He says, Nahyasya janmano hitu karmano vamahipate atmamayam vineshaya parasya drashturatmanaha. He says, Mahipate, O king, atmamayam vina ishaya parasya drashturatmanaha. Nahyasya janmano hetu. Krishna's janma, Krishna's birth in this world has no other reason. Even though he already gave some other reason, but he says, has no other reason but the mercy of Krishna. Atmamaya. And he actually says it's Atmamaya. So Mayavadis can easily interpret this verse as, there is no other reason for Bhagavan to appear in this world by this Maya, because this is Maya. So he says, but there is no other reason but Atmamaya. He formulates another understanding. Please listen very carefully. He says, it's only by his mercy. It's not that because of dharma, because of this, miscreants or this and that, he has to come. It's just manifestation of his mercy. And then he says how different people react on the mercy of the Lord. How different people, when he comes, they react differently on the Lord. He says that without going into too much details, he describes how the mercy of the Lord manifests differently for different people. Ordinary people, this is the next verse, the manifestation of the Lord's mercy is that ultimately, because of sufferings in this world, they awaken and become a little detached from this world. Demons, when Lord comes, they receive mercy when the Lord kills them. That's 59 verse. Even demons, they receive mercy. But, initially he says, everyone receives mercy, but there is an impersonal way to receive mercy. There is demonic way to receive mercy. Then he says, the Supreme Lord, with the cooperation of Balaram, performed activities beyond the comprehension of even such great personalities as Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. And he says, demigods, they receive mercy when Lord comes personally, because they're completely amazed and they see what the Lord does when he incarnates as Krishna himself. And then he says, he also spread his most pure glories, which destroy sufferings and limitation and ignorance. He also spreads his most pure glories, which destroy sufferings, limitation, and ignorance, to give mercy to the devotees who would be born in the future Kali Yuga. So the Lord comes because of his mercy. He wants to give his mercy to everyone. And therefore he comes himself. He knows there is no hope for us, the future people of Kali Yuga. Therefore he comes as Krishna and performs his most beautiful pastimes. He knows there is no hope for demons. Therefore he kills them and gives them liberation. He knows there is no hope for Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. Therefore he comes and amazes them and makes them to think about himself. And then he speaks about us, and that's the verse which we read together. Yasmin sat karma piyushe yashastircha varesa kri shrotanjali rupasritya dhunute karma vasanam. He speaks about us. He says, Lord comes, and then we can really listen about him with shrotanjalis, with the ears which are like cups. Anjali means when you take your palms in a cup. So you make your ears and you drink this, and then dhunute karma vasanam, all the desires, all the karma vasana, all these tendencies about which the ninth canto is describing will be washed away. All these strong desires, all this karma vasana will be there, will be washed away if you drink properly about this. And then he speaks about Vrishnyandaka, Mandu, Shurasena, how Lord Krishna gives mercy to them, reciprocating with them. And then this is the verse before the last verse of this chapter. He says, Yasyanam makarakundala charu karna brajat kapola subagam savilasa hasam nityo savam natatripur drishibih pibantyo naryo narascha muditah kupitani mescha. The joyful gopis and Priya Narmasakas drank with their eyes Krishna's face, a continual festival of from his makara earrings, but they could not be fully satisfied and became angry with the they made their eyes bleed. Swami is doing at this. Oh. Hmm?
We lost the video.
No, you didn't close me. I am back.
Oh, okay.
Because the electricity failure and internet dependent on this, but we made a connection. So just a few last words. What Shukadev Goswami is doing this in this end of this ninth canto. He says that the Lord comes to reciprocate with different kinds of devotees. And it's only Lord himself in his fullest manifestation of Krishna can ideally and perfectly reciprocate with all kinds of relationships which are there. And this whole 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, to which this 9th canto is the key, it's the neck. The 10th canto is the beautiful smiling face, and the neck is the 9th canto. So the 9th canto is actually, if we really understand the message of this 9th canto, if we really understand that the Lord comes to reciprocate with us, and if we read this 10th canto with the proper understanding that this is the reciprocation of the Lord with the different devotees, and if we try at the same time to emulate the relationship which the inhabitants of Raj have with the Lord, then we will be completely free from all our problems and all the impediments which are there. So by describing this 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the stories of 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Shukadev Goswami says, yes, this is the problem. That's the problem which you will encounter while engaging in devotional service, because there are many karma vasanas which are hidden within your heart. And they will surface one after another in the process of devotional service. So the obstacles, impediments will be there. But there is one beautiful way, and the only one way to actually overcome all these problems is just to hear with eager ears the pastimes of the Lord described in the 10th canto. And that's why he came. That's why he came. He came to give us hope. And if he wouldn't come, we wouldn't have any hope. We wouldn't really come so much hope. So basically, again, coming back to the initial question which I asked in the beginning, what is the unified message of this 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam? 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is about anartha nivritti process. That's the process of anartha nivritti which takes place in the heart of a living entity, surrendered living entity, who is serious to engage their senses in the process of devotional service. And the problems will be there, but the most powerful way to overcome these problems is actually given in Srimad Bhagavatam itself. That's the beautiful lilas of personal lilas, nitya lilas of Krishna in the spiritual world. That's the way to overcome our problems. So therefore, I read these two verses from this 9th canto. One verse is the determination of Maharaja Katvanga when he all of a sudden realizes that this world is phantasmagoria. He looks at this world with all these, problems and demons and, all this Durvasa Munis and all this, man-eating tendencies and sex. And he says, this is just mirage. This is phantasmagoria. This is illusion. and he gives it up immediately. The story of Maharaja Katwanga is famous because actually he very quickly he did it, because of this knowledge, as Prabhupada explains in the purport to this verse, Vairagya Vidya. He develops Vairagya because of Vidya. So from one side, ninth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is giving us this Vairagya Vidya, the knowledge of Vairagya, the knowledge of renunciation, by describing the futility and this really strange nature of this world, this Gandharva Pura. So that's one part of it, describing all these illusory pursuits which people in this world are engaged with. And at the same time, it gives us the powerful remedy to this, how to relinquish it. For that, we have to see, to have a look into the reality of spiritual world, eternal reality of spiritual world. And that's the second verse which I read from this end of the ninth canto. Yasmin satkarma tuyushe yashas tirkavare sakrit. That this is the stories about Krishna is tirkavara. It's the best of the tirkas. It's the best of the holy places. If you put yourself into this holy place with this eagerness, satkarna piyushe, yasmin satkarna piyushe, yashas tirtavare, sakrit, immediately. And the same moment, if your ears become big like the cups of your palms, and you try to drink it, knowing that this is the only remedy from this phantasmagoria of this material world and completely illusory attachments which we develop by being in this material world, in this dangerous place, then dhunute, sakrit dhunute karma vasana, we will become purified from karma vasana, from all these desires. So that's, I try to explain what is the internal design of this amazing and very beautiful book, ninth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. What is there? All the problems which we will encounter in this dangerous place, where we will, we will meet with all these problems and casualties and impediments. And what we should do, we should remain devoted, we should associate with devotees, see their complete dependence on the Lord, learn from them how to remain dependent on the Lord, and at the same time try to place our mind into this best of the holy places, Tirthavara, and become purified by this snan of Krishna Katha. So that's my little description of the essence of this ninth canto. I'm sorry for being a little chaotic.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. No, not at all. It was, since we had a long separation, and I think this was much needed. And we have actually two questions, but before I go there, wanted to encapsulate what you shared with us today. The two verses in particular, 9947 and 92462, wherein, the underscoring point is that this world is a dangerous place. Develop Vairagya Vidya, 9947. And in the purport to 92462, Srila Prabhupada says, materialistic activities are unnecessary for the soul, is something that you stressed upon. And the two core issues that we all face in devotional life that you brought out so very beautifully from the ninth canto is that difficulties will come. let's not be in the illusion that there won't be difficulties just because we are engaging in devotional life. But what we have to do is continue to depend on the Lord no matter what. The second issue that you brought out,
And he,
and the second point that you brought out so beautifully,
the
particularly from the example of King Yayati, is that lust is the greatest enemy. That's an issue. Don't underestimate. You stressed upon the conflicts that are more internal than external. And devotional life brings out the circumstances where the internal conflicts manifest in front of us and become challenges, bottlenecks, and they come in our way. But the beautiful solutions from the ninth canto that you brought out, Guru Maharaj, is associate with the devotees, with advanced devotees. And the quotable quote that you gave us is always be eager to hear Krishna Katha and bathe in it. So I think it was a very beautiful session that actually leaves us a lot to reflect, contemplate upon after this session. And I would only like to say, on behalf of all the assembled devotees, that we are eager to hear. And please, the separation that we had this time, if it can be shortened, we'll be very grateful to you. And we would like to continue this journey into the most important canto that you have brought us to, which is the 10th canto onwards. The two questions which we would like to take up, one is from Manju Mataji and the other is from Anupama Radharani Mataji. The first one is from Manju Mataji, where she talks about, when you brought out the point that lust is the greatest enemy, she says, how about lust that is more mundane, like for possessions, enjoyment of company of relatives and friends?
lust is lust. It's called kama. Kama means desire. Kama means desire to enjoy, to be in the center, to lord it over material nature. It may manifest in very gross forms. It may manifest in more innocent forms. But ultimately, the lust should be replaced with the desire to serve. And that's not easy. It's easy to say. It's difficult to do. So again and again and again, we have to encounter or face these different forms of the lust takes. You know, Ravana, he had 10 heads. And, you know, when you cut off one head, another head would pop up. And then you cut this other head, and this other head is already ready there. So it means that lust has many, many faces. And you get rid of one, you know, appearance of lust, but then the lust takes another shape. In Mahabharata, there is a beautiful section which is called Kama Gita, the song of Kamadev. And Kamadev himself says that, you know, he himself glorifies and he says, yeah, sometimes I take the shape of desire for spiritual practice. Even, you know, because people think that this is the way to enjoy this world. And we can see all these esoteric practices which don't stress service so much, but they stress all kinds of, you know, mystic powers which you will have to achieve. And stuff. So last is last. Last has many different faces, and we have to replace the desire to. And for that we have to be very careful. That's another important message of this 9th canto. We have to be very, very careful, but at the same time we have to hope for the protection of the Lord. The Lord will protect us, but this world is dangerous place. So.
Thank you, Maharaj. Manju Mataji, is that okay? You can unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. No, I understand that it can lead to other things, but it's very difficult to do if you're a grasta and the only one following the ISKCON practice. So other people don't understand. So it's a lonely journey, but one looks to the Lord for his mercy.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we go on to the next question. Anupama Radharani Mataji, do you want to ask the question? You want to switch on your video? Or shall I go ahead and read out your question?
Prabhu, you may please go ahead and read my question.
So Maharaj Anupama Mataji, her question is, Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept obeisances. Thank you for this most amazing class on Canto 9. You mentioned that Maharaja Ambarish and Yayati were contemporaries, and due to the influence of Maharaja Ambarish, who was a pure devotee, Maharaja Yayati was influenced to take up bhakti in the end. After thousands of years of material enjoyment and becoming frustrated by it, is there any reference in the scriptures about their meeting?
The only reference which I encountered is this commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, where he makes this point. He's actually explaining why all of a sudden he developed this renunciation. Just 1 second. I will read the purport fully. It's not big, but it's very beautiful. At the end, in the chapter 19, verse 29, Maharaja Yayati says, Namastubhyam. Actually, this is the verse which Sukadeva Goswami pronounced himself. Namastubhyam Bhagavate Vasudevaya Vedhase Sarva Bhuta Divasaya Santaya Brihate Namaha. I offer respects to you, the Supreme Lord Vasudeva, residing in all living entities. I offer respects to the great Lord who is peaceful. Namastubhyam Bhagavate Vasudevaya Vedase Sarva Bhuta Divasaya Santaya Brihate Namaha. It's the prayer of Sukadeva Goswami, or maybe Maharaja Yayati himself. It's not clear. So this is what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes in translation by Banu Maharaj. By what practice does one absorb the mind in Krishna? This is the question upon which this verse answers. One does this by offering respects, by meditating and chanting. When Ambarisha was the emperor of the 7 islands, it is understood that Yayati was the ruler of Bharatavarsha. Ambarisha is the 8th in the line of Brahma, Marichi, Kashyapa, Vaivasvan, Shradadeva, Nagava, Nabhaga, and Ambarisha. Yayati was the 8th in the line of Brahma, Atri, Chandra, Buddha, Pururava, Ayu, Manusha, and Yayati. Because of the influence of Ambarisha, Yayati, who was absorbed in material enjoyment, developed great devotion. Because of Yayati's association, Devayani also developed great devotion. When the dynasty from the sun and moon begins simultaneously, and when the emperors of the Sun dynasty ruled the 7 islands. The kings of the Moon islands of the Moon dynasty ruled Bharatvarsha. When the members of the Moon dynasty become emperors of 7 islands, then the members of the Sun dynasty becomes the kings of Bharatavarsha. This is how the sovereignty of the dynasties of Sun and Moon, of the Sun and Moon operate. So they kind of exchange roles. That's what he says. But that's the only information which I have. But I find it very significant.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Rasakrita Prabhu has sent another question. If there is time, if Maharaj is okay with it, could you please read
so
it?
yeah, correct. So there is a question not follow through, it's a separate question, Maharaj, which talks about when Krishna liberates the demons by killing them, what does it mean? Does it mean they are situated in the Brahmajyoti? What is their attitude stroke consciousness? When they fall back in the material world again, or do they regain their demoniac attitude, or are they in the mode of goodness?
So Krishna liberates them by showing them his beauty. And by looking at him, they forget everything and all their sinful propensities are washed and they get the proper liberation, not necessarily Brahmajyoti. Brahmajyoti is not liberation as such because it's not permanent. Therefore, liberation, which other forms of the Lord give, that may give impersonal liberation. But when all the associates of the Lord, see him in person, and he liberates them by being present in front of them. Well, of course, it may depend. As far as I could understand, it depends. But we have the statement of Bhishmadev, where he says that by seeing the beauty of Parthasarathi, the charioteer of Arjuna in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, all the kings, they went back to Godhead. And in Vishnu Purana, it is very interestingly said that when Lord Ramachandra killed Ravana, Ravana was not liberated. When Lord Krishna killed Shishupala was liberated ultimately. Okay, I guess that's it. I don't know when be our next session because, first of all, 10th Canto, I never did a review of 10th Canto. I don't know how to do review of 10th Canto. 10th Canto is not something you should review. So I'm a little bewildered what to do next. But at least I did the 9 cantos. Let's see what's going to happen next.
Okay, but we certainly need to continue the process of hearing and learning from you. So we will connect with you. I'll connect with you as to how we go about our future sessions. For sure, the messages and that we are getting from the devotees is that they certainly wish to continue. So we don't want to, there can be the periodicity can be worked out and the subject matters, but we certainly wish to continue. That is our heartfelt desires. In fact, I must read out a few appreciations that I've been receiving. Manju Mataji, very thankful, to all to the nectarian knowledge. Sunaja Mataji, enlightening session, very informative from Achra Mataji, and the one that came from Nitya Narasimha Prabhu. Heartfelt obeisances to Maharaj for giving such tough subject in easy and digestible way. So I think you've taken us through a wonderful journey up to the 9th canto, and we look forward for continued association with you, Guru Maharaj. It's very important for us. We are selfish here, and we look forward that you'll hopefully fulfill our desires.
Let's see.
Hare Krishna. Bhagavatam Granth ki
Hare Krishna.
jai. Holiness Bhakti Vijnana Goswami Maharaj ki jai.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Kalpataru.
Vanchakalpatarubhascha sindhubheva patitanam vamnebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah.
And thank you all the devotees.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.